So welcome to the spring quarterly meeting of the AASHTO Inter-Committee Working Group on Shared Mobility, Mobility on Demand, and Mobility as Service. I'm Brian Lagerberg. I'm the Director of the Public Transportation Division at WASHDOT and am the convener of this working group. And rather than have people introduce themselves now, can each of you please just introduce yourself quickly as you participate? For those of you that are new to this group, this is one of 4 intercommittee working groups of AASHTO focused on emerging mobility services. The working group is a platform for coordination and collaboration among states. It also facilitates communication with federal and our external partners. With that, let's start our first session. This is a cross-discipline update on and subcommittee considerations. The needs of shared mobility, mobility on demand, and mobility as a service are highly cross-cutting. Today, we're joined by 3 AASHTO staff liaisons here to give short report outs on their group's focus areas. As they give their remarks, I ask you to consider what topics stand out as priorities to your offices and consider what topics we as a working group should focus future conversations on. Their remarks will be followed by an open discussion for you to share your perspectives. With that, I'd like to welcome Nick, and then Penelope, and then Kyla. And if you could all please introduce yourselves and then share your remarks. So take it away, Nick.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Rebecca. I also welcome the opportunity to be here in front of your committee. And I'm just going to give some background information on NOCO, which is the National Operations Center of Excellence, particularly for folks who aren't familiar with it. So if we can go to the next slide. This Operations Center was established probably almost 10 years ago to provide centralized services to the transportation system management and operations community, or what we commonly refer to as the TISMO community. So we provide a suite of TISMO resources. We're facilitating knowledge transfer as well as promoting networking opportunities for professionals in that area, as well as communicating any advancements in that particular space. If we can go to the next slide. The center was really set up as a partnership between AASHTO, ITE, as well as ITS America through a cooperative agreement with the Federal Highway Administration. So all of these partner associations work together to essentially deliver the message and all of the information as part of NOCO. We can go to the next slide. So how does this fit in with mobility services? Planning for operations really isn't just limited to our roadway system. Mobility services, and let's just take, for instance, transit, can shoulder a range of management and operations responsibilities. These roles should be included in planning for operations, and there are many mobility strategies that can help optimize transportation system performance. And these strategies can help with travel time improvements, reliability, access to information about mobility services, or other approaches that improve performance. And I just want to give you some examples, which are on the next slide. That would include things, if we can go back one slide. Yeah, this would include items such as transit signal priority, or TSP, bus on shoulder, bus rapid transit, bikes on transit, either bus or rail, first mile, last mile connections, real-time transportation information, coordination for special events and work zones, as well as ICM. And so these are all areas that we have a focus in on, and we're working with various groups and organizations to get this information onto our knowledge transfer area. If we go to the next slide. And this would include case studies And we offer a variety of TISMO mobility case studies through our NOCO website. And you can see the link there if you're interested in taking a look at any of those. And then if we can go to the next slide, we also, through our Knowledge Center, we have more resources available, and that includes training programs. And if we can go to the next slide. There's also some specific information on shared mobility data, and that's related to the challenges of the collection, analysis, and management of data from shared mobility applications, along with resources for overcoming those particular challenges. And we're going to be looking at, as I mentioned earlier, doing some more in this particular space. And if we can go to the next slide, this is just kind of and this is my last slide, just really kind of outlines all of the resources that are included through NOCO. So whether it's case studies, webinars, peer exchanges, which we do in person or virtual. We also have a focus area on workforce development, training programs, industry contacts, industry research, and we're also trying to reach out to other organizations. So for instance, we're going to be partnering with the Community Transportation Association of America, or CTAA. They have an upcoming conference that we're going to be attending. We'll have an exhibit booth there, and we're also working with Rebecca and her team on the AASHTO Roundtable, where we will be tying in some of the TISMO related topics I just discussed into transit. So there's a lot more information. So for those of you that are interested, you could just visit transportationops.org, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Let's hold the questions until after the 3 presentations.
Okay.
Penelope.
No, ask the questions now so that I can plug my headphones in, since I showed up so late. Sorry. Hey, good morning. I'm sorry I can't turn camera on. I'm in a very low bandwidth area. Can you hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I don't have a slide, but Nick's slide can come down. I'm supposed to talk about the CDMA and what things that we're doing, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Actually, can I ask Kyla to go ahead of me, and I will be more organized in about 2 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry for the surprise.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to go ahead. Rebecca, I do have just a couple slides if I can share my screen. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be with you today. I'm planning to share a little bit about the Committee on Planning. I have just a couple slides here. I just feel like it's helpful to get kind of oriented to the AASHTO committee structure. So the Committee on Planning is one of AASHTO's 30 committees. Members are appointed to the committee, but we have a lot of opportunities for engagement that are happening at like the subgroup level. So I'll share a little bit about what the Committee on Planning is up to. But we are the Committee on Planning under the Program Delivery and Operations Committees here at AASHTO. And the Committee on Planning purpose is to address all aspects of the transportation planning process, including federal regulations, current industry practices, and emerging approaches and concepts. And the committee is dedicated to providing state DOTs the expertise, resources, and tools they need to implement a robust planning process within their agencies that is multimodal, multidisciplinary, innovative, and consensus-oriented. So the Committee on Planning has quite a few different activities that happen kind of both at the committee and at the subcommittee level. So this slide I'll just talk through a little bit. Just wanted to share again kind of about the activities of the committee. So there are 3 subcommittees under the Committee on Planning. We have a policy and rulemaking subcommittee. That group meets monthly and currently is really focused on the reauthorization process here at AASHTO. So talking about federal legislation and really identifying key priorities for the committee in the next surface transportation bill. So that group has been hard at work kind of identifying the initial priorities for the planning group. We also have a research subcommittee, and that group works very closely with TRB and our NCHRP partners to identify committee on planning research needs. We're currently in the middle of a committee on planning research symposium, which we do in 2 parts. So we had the first part 2 weeks ago to really talk about what are kind of the big picture research needs in the planning arena. And then this week we have another session on Thursday talking about, prioritizing those identified needs and then really trying to figure out kind of the next steps as far as developing a proposed research to submit for NCHRP funding. We also have a professional development group that doesn't meet regularly, but hosts kind of a variety of events throughout the year. So one thing that group is doing right now is we do a series of side chat interviews with planning directors across the country. Excuse me. And so that group has really been facilitating having those interviews and just identifying professional development opportunities for planners kind of across the country and hearing from planning directors and career trajectory and different paths forward. We also have a few topical and technical task forces. So we have a CMAC group that meets every other month just to talk about different issues and topical areas within the CMAC program. That group has also been talking about the carbon reduction program and some of the other discretionary grant programs through IIJA. We have a multimodal planning task force, which might be the most relevant for this audience. That group meets every other month. We have a lot of involvement with bike and ped coordinators. We work with the Council on Active Transportation with that group, but would really be open to kind of a stronger transit connection. Again, these groups are all kind of open to state DOT staff who might be interested in discussing any of these topics. So I can put my email in the chat afterwards, but if you're interested in more information on any of these opportunities, I'd be happy to connect with you. We also have a freight planning group. So we work closely with AASHTO, Special Committee on Freight, but that group is really more focused on kind of freight planning practitioners. And then we do have a few other efforts. So we are newly starting a STIP manager forum as an opportunity for STIP managers to connect on issues that are relevant to them. We also have a newly established local programs community of practice. That group has been meeting for a while, but recently we're bringing that under the Committee on Planning umbrella to talk about issues relevant to state DOT staff that work with local programs, administering those programs locally and working with local partners. And then Penelope might talk about this a little bit too, but the Committee on Planning is also involved with the AASHTO Census Transportation Solutions Technical Service Program. That was formerly known as CTPP, Census Transportation Planning Products, but recently rebranded. So Penelope might talk a little bit more about that, but that's potentially another opportunity for people to get involved with that. And then the Committee on Planning does have a few other things that are happening. So we do quarterly full committee webinars. That's new this year, but just an opportunity to share all of the different things that are happening at the subgroup level with the full committee. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out. So if you're interested in being added to that, let me know. Just has some planning related information that goes out weekly, mostly different news articles or things that are happening at the committee level. And then the Committee on Planning is meeting this year in person in September in St. Louis, along with the Committee on Data Management Analytics, which is the group that Penelope will talk about in a minute, and then the Committee on Performance-Based Management. So those 3 groups work pretty closely together. We're meeting in person together this year. So happy to answer any questions whenever we move to that. And thanks for having me today.
Thank you, Ella. All right, Penelope, are you ready?
I am absolutely ready. Sorry
Awesome.
for my disorganization when I rolled in, and I still don't have any slides, but I do 2 things at AASHTO. Good morning, everybody. I'm Penelope Weinberger. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Transportation Data. And we have been working with the sort of Mobility as a Service MaaS group for a while now. Daniela Bremer, who is a representative to it, is part of the data committee and part of the leadership of the Committee on Data Management and Analytics. And so she reports to us about what's been happening within AASHTO and helps keep us up to date. But I'm going to tell you more about different efforts that the Committee on Data Management and Analytics does. And usually I would just show our website because it's typically very robust and has lots of information about what we do. But unfortunately, our websites are down. I understand they're coming back up today. I'm very excited about that. But I'm just going to give you some sort of high-level stuff. We're part of the regular AASHTO committee structure. The Committee on Data Management and Analytics is a cross-discipline committee, and it has kind of the typical subcommittee structure as all AASHTO committees do. We have a subcommittee on policy and guidance, one on professional development, one on research, one on outreach, and that sort of same stuff. But the thing that we do a lot more of, which might be of much greater interest to this group for cross collaboration, is that we also host a number of communities of practice. We have a community of practice for the chief data officers or people in that role at the DOTs. We have one for chief information officers, one for chief information security officers, and one on data analytics. And just recently, I think I've decided that we need to have one also on artificial intelligence and machine learning as a result of some work that we did at our AASHTO spring meeting last week. So together with Kyla and with the Committee on Performance-Based Management, the Committee on Data Management and Analytics will also be meeting in September. And at that point, we'll probably launch that last committee, community of practice. And I know that Rebecca is going to talk about communities, our collaboration tool that we use at AASHTO at the end of this meeting. And that's one of the ways that we do it. We host libraries there, and we have usually the different communities of practice kind of design themselves. So some of them meet monthly with a particular topic and have a robust conversation by Zoom or Teams. Some do peer exchanges at our annual meetings, or they'll do like a day-long workshop on data literacy or data governance or that kind of stuff. All of our stuff is very data-centric. And the data committee itself, the Committee on Data Management and Analytics, is kind of data agnostic, and we handle all different kinds of data. So I kind of got into it working with the technical service program that Kyla referenced, the AASHTO Census Transportation Solutions, which is something that I've been working on at AASHTO for over 15 years. And that is a technical service program that is designed specifically just to bring census data, so commuting data by all modes, but just for workers, no freight, no nothing like that. It does have transit, of course, transit information for commuters. To the state DOTs and to MPOs so that they could do their long-range planning. So I was identified as the data person. And then, of course, when the data committee was formed 8 years ago, I was asked to be the liaison. And it's a whole huge world of way more data than obviously just census data. So now we deal with not just travel data, freight data, and sort of data issues. The committee is more about issues of data. So if you're sort of thinking about data policy, how are we implementing AI and machine learning? How are we dealing with data governance? What are we doing with, all of our GIS data? That's what the data committee does. So I'm hoping that when our website comes back up, it'll be a really great resource again for people to just go and look and see whether they want to be more involved with, data policy or chief information officers type of issues or things like that. I think that's pretty much all I have for now until there might be some questions.
All right, thank you all. Now it's our turn. Questions for the panel, or even looking at what topics are pertinent for your office's priorities and this working group. I realize for me, it's still early in the day. I'm on my first cup of coffee, so I'll just sit here and have my cup of coffee waiting for those questions to roll in.
Well, and I will jump in as people are maybe thinking a little bit. But first, just to thank my colleagues for jumping on this call with us. And Brian, like you said at the start of this meeting, this working group is was first structured as an intercommittee working group because, as we all know, shared mobility, mobility on demand, and mobility as a service really is it covers a lot of different interests, and it can impact a lot of different topics and subject matters that are housed within the DOT. So I think it's great to hear a snapshot of what our other committees within AASHTO are doing. This is intended to really be a reminder that we are we have the ability to collaborate and communicate with the other groups within AASHTO, especially if this working group feels that that would provide valuable information or provide fill a gap in what your understandings of any of these topics might be on. So as you sort of soak in all the information that was shared, know that that is where we're coming from with this. And Brian, you had spoken a little bit about the idea of checking in with the group about whether there are topics we're missing, but that we think are important enough that they should be addressed perhaps in a subcommittee format or with additional meetings. We do also have, again, a preview for the end of this meeting, AASHTO Communities coming up, which is another tool that we'll be able to use for collaboration in between our quarterly meetings. And in the chat, my colleagues have shared their resources and some contact information. So certainly your offices can follow up. On their behalf, you can email them anytime.
This is Fred up in New Hampshire. And sorry if you did, I had to step away for a few minutes there, but anything, and this might be for Penelope, anything related to GTFS Flex would be great. Some sort of standard basis to let us have demand response as a standard platform for that, for other developers to jump on. I know we in New Hampshire, that's our next, well, not quite the holy grail maybe, but it's the next priority that we're trying to work on statewide is that, in that until we have that, we don't see it, the next generation of MaaS being able to be done. So
Thanks, Fred. That is a great
thank you.
question. And I think that you're dead on. I think, without the general transit feed up and running for the states, it's going to be much harder to do big mobility stuff. The data committee is not explicitly working on that, but we do have a data analytics community of practice that works on different issues as they come up. And the way that we kind of function is, for a question on, I would probably try to convene other states, see what other states are doing with the GTFS, especially smaller urban states, and see, kind of like how they're implementing it or how they're updating it, how they're maintaining it, or how transit agencies are. So we would typically take a question such as yours and send it out to either the entire committee or the committee and that community of practice, and just, kind of aggregate the answers and send them back out. So, and we're more of a resource than an answer.
Yeah, no, perfect. And already, thank you, Elliot, and Penelope. Good. Thanks.
All right, Carrie, I see your hands up.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I tuned in late, so I apologize if this was already covered, but one of the areas that we're asking for other topics, one of the areas Arizona keeps getting, I'm from Arizona DOT, by the way. One of the topics we keep getting asked by our local and regional partners has to do with integrating e-bikes into the roadway network. Now, it doesn't affect us as much because ADOT normally owns very few miles of the road, and most of the e-bike questions generally come up on the local side. But we do keep getting asked about that as it relates to state policy and potential legislation. Just kind of curious if that is a topic for this group, or if there's some other AASHTO group that would better be suited for that kind of discussion.
mean, I think that's one more for Rebecca in terms of incorporating the topic, but in terms of the data aspect of it, is the question more like, are you getting the data, is it the route data or travel miles or GIS data from the e-bike provider? Or
We're
what?
not getting any of that.
Right.
Nor are we getting good information on our crashes. They're still being, widely misidentified by law enforcement. So we don't really know what's going on with them, other than the fact that there seem to be more and more of them every day.
Yeah. So ideally, I would probably coordinate with the TRB Bike Ped Committee to kind of figure out what other, I mean, this is, I hate to sound like a broken record, but figure out what other people are doing and, see if you can get that rolled in. Perhaps you already have done that. But Rebecca, is this a body that's planning on looking at bike data and e-bike data, bike and ped stuff?
This does fall within our purview. It is something that we haven't had a discussion on this year yet. So it's definitely something that we can look at or add to one of our agendas for one of our upcoming quarterly meetings.
Yeah, if nothing else, it would be good to have sort of a compendium of what other states are doing, but also maybe some, I don't want to call it model legislation, but might be good to have some or give some thought to model documentation within the crash crash manual, and possibly some law enforcement training that might help some of our local law enforcement agencies.
Thanks for sharing. I think this is definitely something for us to follow up on and dig deeper into.
Sure, thanks. I did have another question though, and I don't remember who mentioned this, but it was I think the last presenter mentioned there's going to be, they're looking at a subcommittee for AI, both autonomous, assuming autonomous vehicles and connected infrastructure. Would that be through this group, or would that be through the ITS group?
We do have another intercommittee working group specifically for AVs. So if this is a topic that we feel as our own working group is really important, I think we can explore having some sort of joint discussion on the matter, or sending one of our members to one of their meetings and then hearing a report out of what was discussed. So there is technically an existing group, and it's one that we can collaborate with.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in volunteering for that if you need someone.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Elliot.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, first of all, follow up on what Fred was asking about. I put a comment in the chat, but Minnesota DOT implemented a regional mobility as a service project with FTA as part of a couple innovation grants, and we implemented GTFS Flex, and we're one of the projects that helped move the discussion along to get it officially adopted. So it is officially part of GTFS now. It's no longer provisional. So if folks are interested in that, they can reach out to me. But the comment that I wanted to share was, I was at ITS America last week, and I participated in a little focus group with US DOT. And one of the things that I mentioned that I wanted folks to start thinking about is right now, a lot of the data-driven technology that happens around roads and individual vehicles is very siloed from what's happening with transit and shared mobility. And I think we're going to see a convergence of those technologies at some point in the future. Automobiles are only going to get more expensive, especially as you add more automated features. And at some point, folks are going to want to recoup that cost, and there's going to be probably more sharing going on. If not, more of a move to fleet vehicles being a solution for folks with autonomous vehicles. So I feel like there's an opportunity there to really be looking more at how these things converge. One of the things we're looking at on our roadmap for mobility as a service which right now is very focused on transit and shared mobility, but how do we incorporate things like parking, tolling, and any kind of pilots around distance-based fees? So we have a much more dynamic data sharing system and ability to implement incentives and dynamic pricing and things like that that can drive desired mode shift. So I'd throw that out there and see, if there's some interest in furthering those conversations. Again, I did share that with USDOT. I have no idea how they're going to take that, but something AASHTO might want to look at as well.
Hearing nothing, let me, Nick and Penelope and Kyla, are you able to stay through the meeting today?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'll stay as well. This Kyla.
That'd be great. We have an interesting presentation on data that I think at least addresses some of these issues. And I think it's worth your participation in that. And I also would like to remind everybody that questions, those two questions at the bottom, I'd like us to just keep focusing on those and continue to think about those through the next set of presentations. With that, I'd like to move us along. We're joined today by federal partners at FTA, Office of Research, Innovation, and Design, as well as colleagues from the Shared Use Mobility Center. And we will first hear from these partners and then from the Washington State DOT staff on data interoperability and the way state can support regional mobility data projects. And so to start, Rick, I see you're on. I don't know if you're the presenter today. And then also, Al, I think you're presenting for the Shared Use Mobility Center. So Rick, if you could start, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I won't say very much, actually. I'd like Al to do most of the talking, but I will say only that, I've had the pleasure of speaking with this group a number of times in the last number of months, getting on a bit longer in time. And it's been exciting to hear, the ideas that we've talked through and how we might together advance some common activities, some common action toward various types of mobility innovations. We've talked a lot about how to utilize data. We've had this morning too some great conversations. I love hearing about the adoption of Flex and how we can maybe move that forward to create a real new opening for understanding what resources are available for our community. So I have asked my friends from the Shared Use Mobility Center, with whom we have a cooperative agreement to, for lack of better phrasing, find ways to reduce barriers to the integration of the types of solutions that we in our office have tested with many of you, on this call and out there in the community as part of our partners in these demonstrations. They help us to help you all to take what those who've been part of our work have done and implement these solutions more broadly. And so I've asked Al and Colin to join us today to help us to think through the types of activities that we might take on together with the support of the Shared Use Mobility Center as a resource. And I'll leave it there, but I very much want to provide the resources we can from FTA's perspective to help this group and therefore help, obviously, the whole of our community. So I'll stop there. I guess Al and Colin, if you guys would like to take things over.
Having some technical difficulty here. Sorry.
Hey, Al, we can both see and hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, great. All right. I can't see it. That's what's throwing me off. So, but thank you, Rick, for the introduction.
Sure.
It's great to meet everyone here. I recognize some of the names and some of the people. It's nice to meet you. My name is Al Benedict. I direct our accessibility programs within the organization, and I also lead our knowledge sharing activities for the FTA. I'm joined by Colin, our research director at the Shared Use Mobility Center. I didn't prepare a presentation, but I do have a little summary of our work here, and then really sort of ending with a question and hoping to spur a little discussion. We're a nonprofit organization working to further an equitable and accessible transportation system. We see public transit, bus, rail at the center, and then look to innovative strategies to complement that system with new modes and technology systems, such as microtransit, bike share, or like we're talking about here today, the role of data interoperability. And we have been working with the FTA for a number of years now, providing technical assistance to mobility innovation demonstration projects, and working to produce knowledge sharing materials to further the industry. Through these efforts, working with Rick and his team and a number of the state DOTs, a couple here on the call today, I recognize, really that are kind of leading the charge and supporting mobility innovation across their state. This work has really sparked our curiosity and interest in the important role that state DOTs can play supporting mobility innovation. In building off our past work, we are working to understand further what the role state DOTs are doing regarding mobility innovation, particularly around data standards and interoperability, both solutions tried, and in some cases, even more important, barriers and challenges that state DOTs are facing. We recognize that state DOTs are in a unique position to support coordination of services and interoperability at a state level, spanning the varying needs across urban and rural areas. And I'm sure most, if not everyone here today, is familiar with the concept of interoperability, but just to set the stage for our discussion, it's really a broad concept. At its simplest, it can be defined as the ability for any mobility technology component to exchange at an open standard or schema with other components in that mobility technology system. The counter to open systems are proprietary software platforms that we're all familiar with that often don't allow for that open exchange of information to occur. And this poses barriers to achieving our interoperable collaborative goals. Some of the approaches that we found successful in our work with the FTA have been convening working groups to discuss needs, issues, and barriers to mobility innovations. These groups often serve multiple needs. The group itself, similar to this group here today, creates a space to discuss and share lessons learned with others who may be experiencing similar blocks in their work. And the discussions have helped us create resources that then extend beyond the working group itself, and really benefiting the industry as a whole. Some examples of the working groups that we've convened include identifying barriers and issues to interoperability, and then developing an interoperability logic model to outline the steps towards interoperability that states and local agencies can take. We've also, through our FTA work, supported integrated payment solutions. And we also convened a working group to address universal and accessibility mobility needs. And all those really touch on the role of technology and that can play in really promoting interoperable systems. And for reference, we'll paste a couple of the links to those resources in the chat, and I welcome everyone to take a look at them. But our experience is that technology isn't necessarily the barrier. As many here know, it's really institutional barriers that really pose oftentimes the biggest obstacles to reaching these collaborative, innovative mobility solution goals. With that, we were really hoping to have a discussion, really to learn more about what mobility innovation strategies state DOTs in this group are trying, and along with the barriers you've encountered along the way. We'll open it up to questions and discussion. And if there's interest, as Rick mentioned, we'd love to join forces on a more regular basis and help support this group to really achieve the goals we have for this collaborative innovation. With that, maybe I can open it up for discussion.
Yeah, maybe let's have Thomas speak first, and then we'll have a discussion on all of it.
That's a great segue, actually, because Thomas and I work together quite a bit. So
awesome, thank you.
Hi, Al. Good to see you, and good to see everyone here this morning. Thank you, Brian. I'm gonna share my screen here. One moment.
Hey, Thomas, while you're doing that, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry, I was trying not to multitask.
No, we can wait.
You can't see my slides now, right?
Yes, I can see him.
Awesome. Hello,
You're
I'm
in
Thomas
presenter
Craig.
mode.
We're seeing your notes.
Oh,
Yeah, we're
you're
seeing
seeing
presenter
that
mode.
screen. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
that's fine.
That's not right. Okay. This screen. There we go. That should look better now.
Yep, that's good.
Awesome. Cool. Yes, I'm Thomas Craig. I'm a data analyst at the Washington State Department of Transportation, Public Transportation Division. Been there since March of 2022. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about how the WashDOT Public Transportation team is thinking about mobility on demand in the context of the rest of our work. And it was really interesting to hear Elliot's comments earlier about a convergence of types of mobility data, because I think that from a slightly different angle is exactly what I'll speak to here. And I couldn't agree more that thinking about our transportation network holistically is exactly how we should be proceeding right now. So I'll speak about what MOD has to do with state DOTs from that perspective of our ongoing planning and data analysis programs. So as we've approached mobility on demand, we tried to think about it from a number of angles and think about what our perspective should be on mobility on demand. And you can think of MOD in a very narrow perspective as basically focusing on smartphone-enabled movement. That's really oftentimes what the buzzword of MOD or MaaS comes down to mean. But you can also think about mobility on demand from a very broad view or a network level perspective, thinking about how really all mobility requires different transportation services to be provisioned, that everyone demands mobility in order to go about their daily life. That access to mobility, to access through mobility is inequitably distributed in our society today. And that from one perspective, MOD is really about identifying those unmet needs for mobility and enabling more equal access to mobility through analyzing and implementing the programs that get us there and provide that mobility to more individuals. So state DOTs can and really are perhaps uniquely positioned to be able to take that broad network level view. So how have we thought about this internally within our own activities in the last couple of years? So first, this starts by identifying mobility services. And really that means critically to identify and analyze all modes of transportation, thinking about driving, the presence of roads, thinking about transit, the presence of fixed or demand responsive services, thinking about the pedestrian environment, the presence of sidewalks, of curb cuts, of other types of signal systems that enable the pedestrian environment, bikes and other types of devices for mobility through lanes that are open to safe and accessible use for those devices, and more. And of course, also prioritizing those different mobility services at the same time. I mean, we could have drones and autonomous vehicles and all on this list as well, and they're important. But frankly, nowhere near as important as the pedestrian grid that we all engage with in nearly every one of our trips. And yet we don't have any sort of standard data set to describe that pedestrian environment across any state in the United States, let alone the entire country. And that leads us to step 1B, I guess I should say, which is thinking about the standard data sets that allow us to actually view these different networks and these services at the network level, from that broad perspective. So that means not just collecting, but supporting and ensuring 100% publication of data sets such as GTFS, which thankfully is now mandated by the National Transit Database for fixed route services. Also GTFS Flex, mentioned earlier for demand response. And as Elliot mentioned, it's really now just part of GTFS. It's part of the core specification, and that data specification is now being used by a couple of different systems, including customer-facing apps, as you can see in Minnesota, in Washington, and in a few other states and different parts of the world. It also means leveraging things like OpenStreetMap, not just for the roads, but also for information about sidewalks and for open lanes, besides lanes that are constrained to motorized vehicles. GBFS for micromobility, the general bike share feed specification, which allows access to information about bike share services, scooter services, etc., and many other standards that don't exist yet or need to be refined. So after we identified and started to collect all of those data sets, there's also a step 2 here of really thinking about and respecting lived experiences in the context of using those data sets. As we start talking about measures like transit access, transportation access, accessibility of the pedestrian environment, we have to set up metrics and systems for analysis that really understand and respect the experiences of people on the ground, of a transit rider that may be forced to take a trip that takes 75 minutes or more for something that could be a 15-minute drive, which is just a demonstrably inequitable experience for those 25% of Washingtonians and a similar percentage of other people in other states that are non-drivers. Rigor in defining access. So, when we're talking about that pedestrian environment, understanding that if we're not measuring and identifying the presence of curb cuts and other sorts of features that allow the accessibility of that pedestrian environment, that we're really not being faithful to the meaning of the word access. So there are real limitations in our ability right now because of our historical underinvestment in data standards and systems to analyze these things in order to really actually put into practice and into analysis every point implied by these considerations. But being honest about these things, and when we're publishing results and plans, being clear about the assumptions that we're making. If we're drawing half-mile circles, we need to be clear that people can't walk through buildings, and that a person who uses a wheelchair to get around may not be able to proceed even along the pedestrian environment that is present. So then taking that perspective and those data sets, beginning the process of statewide analysis. And this is where I'll get into actual examples of what we're have done in the past and are working on now. So the first, last year, we published our frequent transit service study. This is a process that resulted in us understanding the percent of population living within a half-mile circle of 7 different fixed route transit frequency levels that we defined and measured across the state using GTFS, some Python scripts, ArcGIS, and census data, all technology tools that generally speaking, every state DOT probably has access to. So this is a process that could be replicated for any state. Feel free to reach out and I can share the Python script. And this is something that if you have GTFS for all of your transit agencies, you could have a map like this one within less than a day's work, measuring the frequency of all of the transit services in the state. And then, of course, using those layers in ArcGIS in order to calculate the percentage of people who live within those areas relative to other parts of the state. So this is an analysis that we published. And of course, to the last point about, for example, curb cuts in the pedestrian network, this report was published. We used the half-mile circular buffers and calculated the percentage of access or living with near a transit stop based on those circular buffers. But we then also wrote a hefty section of the report identifying that we didn't have access to the sidewalk data that would allow us to do a more effective analysis, provided that information to the legislature, and before the actual final publication of the report, the legislature actually allocated $10 million, well, allocated $5 million and promised $5 million in the next biennium to the University of Washington to develop a sidewalk data set for the entire state of Washington. So that's a project that is ongoing. So then angling towards our work in progress, really what we're stepping towards is performing a statewide accessibility analysis, terms I'll define on the next slide, using not just that GTFS, but also points of interest data, road data, sidewalk data, census data, and more advanced software in order to perform a comparative analysis of access to opportunities across all modes. So being able to think about, how many destinations, whether it's medical facilities, jobs, parks, et cetera, does a person who is a non-driver have access to relative to a person with a car? Those are the sorts of questions we want to be able to ask. So accessibility analysis generally refers to measures that meaningfully analyze the practical ability to reach destinations provided to different transportation network users. Specifically, what we mean within the context of our work is generally a regional trip planning analysis, essentially, where you're measuring from one or many origins in a region to various destinations in a region, and measuring based on the types of transportation using how many of those destinations a person can get to from various origins. So that's kind of demonstrated here on the screen, where we have in the center a small blue isochrone that you can barely see that indicates the 15-minute travel shed of a transit user from the destination at the origin of the screen. And then the larger red isochrone is the 15-minute travel shed of a person who has access to a car. Zoom in there to see that very small travel shed enabled by the current transit network for that user. So where are we going? We want to perform a statewide accessibility analysis, including consideration of the pedestrian network with factors likely to affect people with disabilities and other underserved users of the transportation network, to include demand responsive transportation services, to include the consideration of safe lanes of travel for bikes and other such mobility devices, community vetted destinations, so having a conversation with communities around the state about what are the destinations that are important, what is the basket of goods that people should be able to transport themselves to, and start to measure access to those destinations. Currently, we're focusing on using this within our statewide plans and for the evaluation of our grant programs, i.e. saying, the legislature had us allocate this much money through this grant program. How much access did that grant provide relative to the baseline without that grant program? So not currently focused on individual grant evaluation, although that's something that other state DOTs have been looking at using this type of accessibility analysis for. So I will stop there. Hopefully I didn't take too long. And thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So with that, do we have questions?
Well, I'd love to maybe just jump in real quick. That's a great presentation, Thomas. It really sort of exemplifies what I was kind of touching on in my presentation. So it's great to see all the exciting work there.
Hey, Thomas, I'll ask you a question. Al asked us about the role of state DOTs in mobility innovation. How do you answer that question?
I personally answer that question. I mean, so state DOTs are a unique institution within the United States. States, cities and MPOs, which are the other organizations through which a lot of transportation is regulated or provided don't touch the entire landmass. They can't look at the entire network of transportation services in our country. The US DOT is part of the federal government, a government of enumerated powers that, broadly speaking, takes a more tailored regulatory role to the nation. And so, likewise, the federal government is not really in the position to take the broad network level view, but states occupy the entire landmass of the United States, and also, are governments that are meant to take on the role designated by the legislature and governor and roles allocated to them. So I think there's an opportunity to really think of state DOTs as basically the primary network analyst. And thinking of us that way, our role is to ensure that the data is organized, ensure that the data is accessible and standardized, so that a variety of analysts, not just ourselves, but community analysts, private, public, et cetera, can look at and understand the transportation network, and then to promote greater accessibility and greater equity of mobility within within our jurisdiction. So, I guess that would be my answer to that question. I don't know, I think forming that base of knowledge is what we innovate off of. So I focus on that foundation as opposed to the bells and whistles, but I think it enables that innovation later on.
And I think also the fact that, like you mentioned, Thomas, that it is statewide, so it gives the opportunity to not only look at urban areas, but also rural areas and those small towns, and those often don't get the level of attention that larger cities get, but have strong mobility needs nonetheless. So
Elliot, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I mean, I would this is more of a comment than a question, but just to kind of build on that thinking regionally. I mean, I think definitely coming from Office of Transit and Active Transportation at MnDOT and the work that we've been doing around mobility as a service, the boundaries for service areas of different providers are usually kind of arbitrary. They're usually political boundaries, and it's really hard for those agencies to have both the capacity and the ability to think regionally, and be able to, because we know, especially in rural areas, there's a lot of travel across these different service areas to get to destinations for medical services, for shopping, for all kinds of different travel. In the rural areas, you don't really have traditionally things like an MPO that's really thinking in that regional sense. And so I think the DOT has a great ability to, because we have all those partnerships with the local entities. And we also, have some fiduciary responsibilities as overseers of money that flow through to our subrecipients to make sure money's well spent and things are well coordinated. So I do think there's opportunities there, especially where you don't have a regional authority or regional government, where DOTs can serve that role.
Thank you, Elliot. Other people, questions, comments?
Maybe pose a question if there's interest in, there's obviously interest in this group and interoperability and the role of data standards and in service coordination. But is there, we'd love to be a resource to help support those efforts, perhaps convene on a more regular basis, really try to work with the DOTs to identify barriers and challenges, and then collectively solutions that now, that can really further the efforts of this group and other DOTs that may not be as familiar with the benefits of interoperability.
I'll jump in to say a point that Brian asked me to cover and I kind of forgot about, but it's coming up in Penelope's questions in the chat. And the image I showed earlier of the isochrones, where the small isochrone was transit travel shed and the larger one driving. One thing you could do with that type of analysis that's really educational and useful is also compare transit to itself, focused on just comparing access when frequency is changed. So not changing the speed of transit services, but just, for example, doubling the frequency of transit services over large travel sheds or larger times of travel, like 45 minutes. And you can see how much further that travel shed is just by increasing the frequency of transit, decreasing wait times. That itself increases access. So that's kind of to Penelope's questions in the chat, and all of that is very possible with accessibility analysis to do that really fine-grained analysis of different types of transportation services.
So Thomas, if I could answer my own question from my perspective, the one I asked you. I agree. The states are in a unique position. And I think at least in the state of Washington, what we have right now is a legislature that's asking us to care about equity, to care about access, to care about vulnerable populations. That's not been our history, that we've had a legislature that's cared. And so the work that Thomas and his team are doing is important because we have people who are listening. I think for the majority of my time, we didn't have people listening. So there was really no point in performing that work because it had no use. I think what we see now is because the legislature's listening, we have the opportunity to dramatically impact access. And so this work is becoming increasingly important. And in the other place, just last week, the secretary at AASHTO got a letter from somebody who is taking care of their spouse, and that spouse, they tried to get a ride on a service, and the next available ride was in 2025. And we also use anecdotal data. So we're looking at, okay, well, what do we do in that situation? How do we create service where service doesn't exist? And I was watching the chat about political boundaries, that this is an example of political boundaries. But the state has the ability to incentivize and fund and expand reach. And that's what we're looking at. So for me, both the data, whether it's the data as Thomas has been talking about it, or the anecdotal data we get, that's an opportunity today. And it's an opportunity to provide people access and drive innovation by recognizing the importance of access and the damage of lack of access, and make that information available on a broader basis.
That's a good point. And I think we one of the, in working collaboratively as well with the FTA, I think brings additional just insights in this work, and the work of Rick's department, for example, in funding some of these, helping support some of these early initiatives, to kind of continue and learn from those early demonstration projects as they mature and others come to light.
Yeah, following on from one point you made, Brian, I framed this presentation in terms of equity and access, in large part because those are, the words used and kind of directed to be, that were directed to be thoughtful about by our legislature, as you indicated. But I think, I'll say that I think the entire presentation that I just gave could be done focused on budget consciousness, maintaining state of good repair, fiscal conservatism, and the presentation would be every bit as true and every bit as faithful to its principles. So I think that it's worth considering that there's a lot of different ways to frame this information that may be applicable in different contexts.
And maybe I just add to that, Thomas, like the work with HopeLink and this community driven process is just really great work that's happening out in your area that I know you're a big part of.
Indeed, I encourage folk to reach out to Elliot about GTFS Flex. The MnDOT application is really cool and is something that is, especially with the partnership with Transit App, just awesome to see the visuals on. And if someone would like to see get a view of a second similar program, we do also have a GTFS Flex trip planner implementation led by HopeLink, a nonprofit in the Puget Sound area, that is now live in an open beta, and focuses on human transportation services within the central Puget Sound region. So I'm happy to speak with people about that project, and I'll put a link to that program in the chat.
Thank you, Thomas. So Al, I heard you ask or propose or suggest that your organization could be a place to host some of these conversations. And I ignored that largely because I didn't know the answer to the question, and I was going to talk to Rebecca about it afterwards. But I heard it, and
Okay.
it didn't, it wasn't just wind blowing out there.
Yeah. Well, it takes, think about it, but, I think collaboratively we can help support and really learn from the work you're doing too, to be honest, like the state DOTs here are really leading the charge. And so it would be really us learning as much as providing resources, to help alleviate challenges. So but thank you. Thank you. And, please follow up if you have questions.
Well, and thank you, Brian, for being considerate of what AASHTO is able to do. But I will just say right now that we very much look forward to following up with you and staying in close communication, because this has been a great conversation. And clearly there's a lot more to discuss.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, and I asked to have this topic on the agenda today, and I did because I think we're doing amazing things in the state of Washington. Certainly, in comparison to what we were doing, we're doing amazing things, and I believe in the role of public transportation and its ability to provide people access, and that I also believe that we don't focus on it funding wise or intellectually as we ought to be. And so I want to get this information out, and I see Carrie's response. I'd be grateful for assistance getting this started. That's why we're here, is to help kind of make people aware of what's happening in other states. And we're also here to help. So if I think you probably have Thomas's information to get a hold of him and ask questions. If I were you, Carrie, that's where I would start. I'd call Thomas and say, hey, help me do this. But that is the purpose of this, is to show innovation and show how we are all doing things a little bit differently and learning from that. So thank you, Thomas. I appreciate you taking the time to present today. Any other questions, comments? I guess my comment about the legislature not really caring about this until recently is a barrier for adopting projects. There was no reason for us to do those projects until there was interest. Well, Rebecca, it sounds pretty quiet. I think I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next topic. And just want to thank everybody for joining today. I saw we had about 45 people on. I hope that there are conversations outside of this meeting, that you're connecting with people and are able to have those conversations. Before we close, I just would like Rebecca to talk about the working group's new member only platform that AASHTO's developed. So take it away, Rebecca.
Thank you, Brian. Happy to. So it's been mentioned already on this call, but AASHTO has recently undergone this new initiative, this new web platform that we've adopted. It's called AASHTO Communities. It operates kind of like Microsoft Teams, and that there is a platform available to everyone who is an AASHTO member, so all of you. And then within this platform, AASHTO Communities are these subgroups that are specifically for all the different groups. So the committees, the councils, working groups like ours, we all have our own AASHTO community where we can collaborate and share resources together. And so I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough because this is new, and we want to introduce this to you and make sure you all understand how you can take advantage of this new tool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to do some web browsing together. So the first step to all of this is, in order to access AASHTO Communities, you actually need to first create an AASHTO account, my AASHTO account. And you can do that just by going to transportation.org, which is our homepage for our association. And in the corner, you will see 2 buttons, register and sign in. Either of those takes you to this link, to this page where you can go ahead and create your account. If you don't have it yet, it's kind of like a MyTRB account. If you have one of those, it gives you access to the next step of this process. And when you do all of that, then you will have access to AASHTO Communities. So what I've pulled up here is just the home dashboard for AASHTO Communities specifically. You can navigate here by looking at your My AASHTO profile once you've set that up. On this dashboard, you have several things to help you navigate around. First off, you do have an AASHTO Communities specific profile. It includes more details than your My AASHTO account will. So from your profile, you can do things like specify your job title and your DOT. You can connect with other people who are on AASHTO Communities. You can manage all the different groups you're a part of and discussion posts you've engaged with. In the center here is your sort of feed for your communities. You can actually see, I just posted recently some resources to our working group, the Shared Mobility MaaS Intercommittee Working Group. And so now this notification has popped up at the top of my feed. I could click on this link right here to go directly to the documents library of our working group. But if it's not conveniently at the top of your screen, the way you can navigate to our group is over here on the side. There's a box that says My Communities. You can click View All Communities to see your full list. I happen to be on several. You might just be on this one. You might be on a couple, depending on your level of involvement in AASHTO member rosters. But if you can click on ours, which is the Shared Mobility MaaS Intercommittee Working Group, and that takes you to our homepage. And so this is very new. We just got it up and running. So it's looking a little empty. What I thought I could do as a quick demo on this call is show you how to post a discussion. Discussions are one of the main ways that we can really leverage this tool. Anyone can start a thread or respond to other discussions on this board. So if you're looking to engage with everyone else in some quick conversation, or if you're looking for resources, everyone has access to this group. And the way this all works is that you can go ahead and add it directly here, or you can go discussion and then create new thread from there. And what that will do is take you to this page, post a message. It'll automatically fill in the shared mobility working group. You can pick the title for your discussion thread. And then just like any other discussion board, you can write your message here in the body. This is going to be a little 101 to welcome everyone to the group. You can add attachments, which is, I think, a great feature. So attached here, and as soon as I finish my spiel, I will also share these in the chat. But attached here are some quick guides on how to navigate all this. When you set up your profile, you can also set up a signature line so people know who you are, and if they would like to contact you outside of AASHTO communities, you can give your email address. You know, it has the normal features. You can save as a draft. If you want to come back to it later, you can schedule it for a certain time. We're going to go ahead and post this. And we're going to cross our fingers that my internet connection will let this work for us. When this posts, it'll be posted to our discussion board. So now you see, it's currently in moderation, but it will be viewable to everyone. And you can go in, you can reply to it. It can be pinned. So I believe if I go in, this might be a back end thing to approve the moderation, but you can click on it and it takes you back just to the same page. So you can read it more easily. You can see the attached documents. You can download them directly here. And if you want to reply, you do it from this page. So bear with me as I do some quick admin moderating. And now you can add tags to your posts as well to help with organization if you find that it more easy to search things by tags, or you want to highlight something really specific about what you're looking for from other people. And when you do that, if we go to documents, the documents library of our working group, which is another really exciting feature, because this is a members only platform, and it is this group specifically is just for members of our intercommittee working group. You can post resources here that will only be seen by the other state DOT people involved in this group. This is not a public platform. So you can share resources here. I made a post with some quarterly meeting materials, just sort of a running archive. But also, I think it's a neat feature. If you post attachments as part of a discussion, those automatically get uploaded here as well. So you see the Welcome to AASHTO Communities. These are the two documents that I posted in the discussion thread. So it's a very easy way to keep things organized. You don't have to come into documents and create a new entry and also make a discussion. You can do one and it populates into the other. This events page is for if we want to post upcoming meetings. So this will be for, we can post our quarterly meetings here. It'll be just one more way to access them. If you have meetings that you are interested in making available to this group, things related to shared, like if your DOT is hosting a webinar and you think it would be relevant to the other people on this working group, you're more than welcome to post them here. And then finally, the members tab is our members roster. So if you're not sure if somebody else in your DOT is in this group, you can go ahead and search by company name or just by first or last name. It's open to state DOTs. So if there's an interested colleague who would like to be a part of this community, they're more than welcome to reach out to me. And with that, that is a real quick walkthrough of our new AASHTO community. Just to recap, it's got some great features. What I'm most excited about is the discussion thread capabilities and the documents library. And the fact that it is all secured, it is just for our state DOT people. And with that, I would be happy to pause for questions if there are any. And I'll go ahead, while people are maybe thinking, I will go ahead and post those just guidance documents into the chat so that people have them. First, here's a quick access guide. It really just has links to the things I just walked you through in case you're having a hard time navigating. And second will be a more in-depth guide that was actually put together by AASHTO IT, so our web experts, so that you can have a more thorough walkthrough on paper. But that said, if you or any colleagues of yours would like to have another in-depth live walkthrough, I'm happy to do that. Just reach out to me and we can schedule something.
Rebecca, we have a hand up.
Hi, this is Penelope.
We do have a hand up, Penelope.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was a really great walkthrough of communities. Communities is a really good tool. I just wanted to add a couple of comments, if I may, because I've also been using it with my people. I didn't hear you say that anybody of the 79 members can start a conversation. That is true. And any one of your 79 members can add documentation to the library for the shared mobility group. So if you have stuff you want to share, you do. But I also want to alert you that there's an internal conversation at AASHTO right now, because currently it is private in that you must be a member. But for any subgroup, of which this group is one, anything that you post as a document, not your conversations, they will be limited to just this group, but any documents that you post will also automatically appear currently in the parent library. So we're sort of sorting that out right now because some people are happy with that and some people are not happy with that. So it kind of depends on the security level of your group and the types of documents you post. So that's a conversation that you might want to have as you get a little further along into using that.
That's an excellent point. And it's certainly something that we as a group can revisit at our next quarterly meeting to just check in about do a little more in-depth about where the AASHTO communities is at in terms of sort of these behind the scenes settings and what that means for our group itself, definitely. And in between our quarterly meetings, certainly think of questions. It is a tool in progress. Don't ever hesitate to email me. Ideally, I will take maybe 5 minutes at the end of the next quarterly meeting just to check in with everybody. Remind people that this is here if there is anyone that missed this meeting, but catch the next quarterly meeting. So also know that we'll keep talking about this. Absolutely. But with that, Brian, I think I will turn things back to you. Thank you so much for this time.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. I just want to take a moment and thank each of the people that spoke today and presented on a panel. That's really the strength of this working group, is who participates. So thank you all, and feedback is always welcome, either to Rebecca or directly to me. We have meetings and talk about the working group, and strategize on ways to make it more effective. And we would love to hear your perspectives on that as well. So send me an email, send Rebecca an email. So with that, the next quarterly meeting, I think, is in July. Is that correct? Yes. So I look forward to seeing you all, and have a great next quarter.
Thank you all. Thank you, Brian, for another great meeting.